We are joined by former First Lady, U.S. Senator, and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Ms. Clinton, thank you very much for joining us. Here is the first question.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Sequestration. Senator Clinton, Hampton Roads depends on military dollars. We have been downsized.
Right.
Times are tough here in Hampton Roads. Our economy is dependent a lot on military. If elected, what will you do to bring military dollars here to Hampton Roads, Virginia?
Well, first of all, Andy, I think sequestration has been a very blunt instrument to try to keep down spending, and it has disproportionately impacted on preparing for the future and being ready for whatever we have to deal with when it comes to military spending. By the way, I should wish the Navy happy 240th birthday, because that's exactly what it was yesterday, the 240th birthday of the United States Navy. My dad was in the Navy, so I know we've got to have a modern, up-to-date, well-equipped, prepared Navy. We've got problems that we're going to have to deal with around the world, and we can't do it without having the Navy of the future. So I would like to begin to peel back the effects of sequestration. That doesn't mean that every expenditure by the military should be continued. You know that, I know that. But to cut spending just across the board, regardless of consequence, without really taking into account where we need to be positioned for the future, I believe is not the right way to go.
Okay, Senator Sanders struck a nerve talking about economic inequality and disparity. In our country and here in Hampton Roads, so few have so much. He and others paint you as part of that bunch that has so much. What would you like to say about that?
Well, first of all, I agree that inequality is a huge problem in America. In fact, I think we are economically as unequal as we were back in the 1920s. So we clearly have work to do. And that's why I'm laying out very specific policies about how you crack down on Wall Street abuses, but more importantly, how we create more good jobs, how we raise incomes, the kind of investments that will make us richer and safer and stronger in the future. So I am very much focused on this issue. And, periodically in American history, Andy, we get out of whack. We're in one of those periods. We're out of whack. Back at the turn of the last century, President Teddy Roosevelt had to rein in the powers of big corporations. Then during the Great Depression, President Franklin Roosevelt had to literally save capitalism from itself. Well, we're in a period now where the wealthy need to pay more of the fair share that they owe our country from having done so well. Corporations should not be writing the rules that govern them. We have to make sure that too big to fail never happens again, and the middle class is not left holding the bag. So I'm very much in line with the diagnosis, but I have different approaches about how we're going to deal with getting back to broad-based prosperity that will be shared by every working American.
In the debate, you actually answered, we need to rein in the excess of capitalism so that it doesn't run amok and doesn't cause the inequities we're seeing in our economic system. Senator Sanders is running strong because, ma'am, it has run amok. And in a Wavy TV 10 poll of 814 Hampton Roads residents, 62% thought Bernie Sanders won the debate, compared to your 17%. He is connecting. He is cutting through the clutter. Some would argue your campaign right now so far has not been doing that. What would you like to say?
Well, I believe strongly that my message is resonating broadly on a lot of the ongoing research that's done about what is happening across the country and even in states. But I take nothing away from Senator Sanders or anyone who is pointing out that we've got to figure out what to do about it. I think my approaches are more likely to work. I think they don't go as far as some of what he is proposing, because the one thing we know is we want to get back to the right balance, and that means we've got to crack down on excess, but not to the point that it undermines growth. We got to get the economy growing again the way it did when my husband was president.
Senator Bernie Sanders said the American people are sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails. Were you surprised to hear that? And what did you think when you heard it?
No, I'm not surprised at all because that's what people tell me every day out on the campaign trail, and I appreciate it. Senator Sanders putting into words what a lot of Americans feel. And that's why the debate last night was so substantive, and it was so much more about what we all need to do to fix the problems in our country and help people get back to having better incomes, better jobs, more opportunity, make college affordable, all of the issues that we're talking about on that stage last night, and compare that with what you hear from the Republicans, and it's a pretty stark difference. And so, yeah, we want to talk about what's really going to affect the lives of Americans and what the next president needs to do about it.
The comment also made him look good, Ms. Clinton. He had a very good night cutting through politics as usual, the outsider. He was supporting you, and oftentimes he said this might not be politically correct because you're supposed to beat up on your opponent, but then he came to your defense. Do you acknowledge that his campaign has won the hearts of Democrats, moderates in America?
Well, first of all, you know, Senator Sanders and I overlapped in the Senate. I consider him a colleague, and I appreciated very much what he said last night. And I do think that he is energizing people, which is good for the Democratic Party. It's good for our democracy. I think at the end of the day, I will be the nominee of the Democratic Party, and I will take it to the Republicans and be able to succeed in making sure that we don't turn the White House back over to the party that got us in the big financial crisis that we're all talking about so much.
Lincoln Chafee went after you last night, suggesting that he had higher ethical standards. You said you didn't want to respond. I'm asking you, are your ethical standards less than his?
Well, I'm not going to respond, Andy. I think that, you know, the people of New York elected me twice, the second time with even a higher percentage of the vote. President Obama chose me, his primary opponent, to be Secretary of State. I think my record speaks for itself. Now, have I been the continuing target of all kinds of political attacks? Well, yes, and of course we saw that most recently with the admission by the Republican Majority Leader that their whole point of setting up a committee to look into Benghazi, which is a terrible tragedy, was to attack me and bring my poll numbers down. I'm used to that. I understand that you know, you have to be willing to withstand all of that incoming, and I am prepared to do so. And I have the experience that will enable me to not only win the White House, but to actually bring people together to solve a lot of our problems.
Now,
so
they went
thanks
out,
very much, Andy.
They went after you on that, but you went after him on gun control. What would you like to say about that?
Well, there is a big difference between Senator Sanders and myself about the extent to which we should do what we can to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them in the first place, and to hold gun makers and sellers accountable for negligent and reckless behavior. So I pointed out that he and I split on a very important vote. Senator Sanders often wants to hold every corporation accountable for everything except those that make and sell guns. I don't agree with that. He voted for that provision in the Senate. I voted against it. So there are real differences. And let's not forget, 90 people a day are killed by guns. And I don't know how we can let this continue without doing more to close the loopholes, the gun show loophole, the online loophole, what's happened in Charleston, where unfortunately the man who killed those churchgoers shouldn't have gotten a gun, but he got it because one of the loopholes Senator Sanders supported back in the 90s said that he had to get the gun after 3 days, even though information would have turned up showing that he was ineligible. So we just have a very serious difference on this issue, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep guns out of the hands of fugitives and felons and stalkers and domestic abusers and people with serious mental health conditions who should not have them in the first place.
That was my next question. Why in America are we doing so little or so unable to solve the mental health problems in America? We're the greatest country in the world, and yet we fail so miserably with treating mental illness, which leads to probably 75–80% of all these crimes that are being committed with guns and terrible massacres that take place. They always go back to mental illness. What's wrong in America?
Well, I think you've really asked one of the most important questions in this campaign, which is why I've spent a lot of time talking about it. We don't have enough treatment facilities. We don't have insurance companies willing to pay for the treatment of mental illness the way they have to pay for the treatment of every other kind of illness. In the 1980s, the decision was made to close a lot of facilities where people were treated, both inpatient and outpatient, and we've never really caught up with the demand ever since. We still have a stigma. People don't show up and request treatment sometimes because they worry that it will reflect on them as opposed to seeing it what it is. It's a health issue. So we have to take a hard look at our mental health system from top to bottom, and we've got to do exactly what you're saying. We've got to do more to help people. Right now, too many of them end up in jail without any sort of treatment, and unfortunately, we know that they don't come out any better. They often come out worse. So this is a big priority for me in my campaign.
Ms. Clinton, we appreciate your spending time with us. We know, as you said last night, nothing would make you happier than to become the first female president, and we know that you will be running hard to make that happen, and we appreciate your spending time with us today.
Thank you very much. Good to talk to you, Andy.